kind of starting with a big picture, an overview of the study, and also kind of a bit of the sort of motivations behind really what led to all of this. So the BRCA Ashkenazi Jewish founder mutations were discovered over 20 years ago, the most common of which was discovered by one of the principal investigators of the study, Dr. Kenneth Offit. It goes without saying that a lot has changed in, the past 20 years or so. Some things in particular that might be relevant are, a digital revolution, if you will, direct-to-consumer genetic testing and the controversies surrounding that. And, in some contexts, the call for population genetic screening. Unfortunately, some of the things, and one in particular that hasn't changed enough, is the number of individuals at risk who have access to their genetic status. So we know today that still over 90% of those of Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry have not been tested for the founder mutations, and there's a lot of opportunity for growth and improvement. So that's something that has motivated Dr. Offit, and that is shared by the other principal investigators of the study, Dr. Carlin, Dr. Garber, Dr. Domchek, and Dr. Tung. So there have been population BRCA screening studies in a number of different healthcare contexts, including in the United Kingdom. In addition to that, there have been studies in Israel, Australia, and Canada. And these studies have all demonstrated the safety and the feasibility of population BRCA screening, specifically in the Ashkenazi Jewish community. There is more to be done in terms of the scalability of this testing and how it adapts to each healthcare system. So the BRCA Founder Outreach Study sought to demonstrate both the feasibility and the scalability of opportunistic BRCA screening in the Ashkenazi Jewish population in the United States. Specifically 4 US cities is where we began, and anyone over 25 with Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry could enroll. And uniquely, in particular in regards to the scalability, we leveraged technology and engagement with primary care providers. So in terms of how the study worked, it was based on community outreach, and anyone eligible to enroll could go online, complete a chatbot-based registration where they would receive both education about BRCA genetic testing and also what was involved with study participation. Individuals could provide their informed consent, and then they would answer study questionnaires, after which they would have their blood drawn at a local community center. And then on the back end, they would receive results in a medical context, either from a genetic counselor who was involved with the study or their primary care provider. So through that, we're able to pilot this new model that involves technology, particularly on the front end in the education portion before a test, and then on the back end, expanding our medical reach, if you will, by engaging primary care providers. In terms of the things that we've learned, so the study has recruited over 4,000 individuals, and the majority of those who consented to the study completed genetic testing, over 75%. We've seen that there are more women than men who chose to enroll in the study. The median age was about 51. But interestingly, of the men that enrolled, more of them were high risk, a larger proportion of them tested positive. Most of those who enrolled expressed high satisfaction after this pretest education and also after receiving their results, and also a high genetic knowledge after the pretest education, which was important to us in particular in terms of making sure that this alternate model could inform participants adequately of their decision. Thinking about ultimately the results of our participants, over 130 have tested positive, about 3.4% of participants. And that represents, a number of people who have access to life-saving interventions, or potentially life-saving interventions. So, in that subset as well, we saw that over half of our participants had a low-risk family history, and over 1/3 had never previously considered genetic testing. So we know that this model is able to engage those who might not have otherwise had this BRCA genetic testing. On the flip side, another interesting thing that we saw when we look at those who tested positive specifically is that over half had reported a mutation in their family. So these individuals knew about BRCA, it was in a relative of theirs, but they hadn't had genetic testing. So this model, while it can engage those who may have not considered this before, it also might be particularly effective with engaging those who are at particular risk and haven't gone about this test. You know, perhaps this may increase the convenience and the accessibility for them. I've, shared a lot about the participant experience. The other key component was the primary care provider experience. So because the B4 study uniquely engaged primary care providers, we wanted to understand the uptake of primary care providers in the genetic testing process. So interestingly, we saw that only about 1/3 of participants preferred to get their results from their primary care provider. And of the primary care providers who were nominated to participate, less than half, about 40%, agreed or opted in. So as a result, at the end of the day, a minority of results were disclosed by primary care providers due both to participant and provider preference. So in starting to think about next directions, one of the aspects that's important to further study is how we may be able to better engage primary care providers in the genetic testing process. Another thing that we learned was thinking about recruiting individuals through the community, what challenges may exist. So, for example, individuals who may be more affiliated with a particular community or religious center, we can go and speak at their group or their organization, but we still, have a hard time maybe reaching those who might not have a centralized place where we, can promote the study or share it with them. We know that the majority of participants ended up hearing about the study from a friend or a family. So at the end of the day, community engagement, building community partnership and trust is critical when you're thinking about offering expanded testing to any group in particular. In terms of next directions, so we're currently in the phase of really looking deep into the data, analyzing what we have learned so far and reporting out those findings. There are a lot of potential next steps in that one of the things that we've learned is further research is needed. So this study has demonstrated that BRCA Ashkenazi Jewish population screening is feasible in our healthcare system, but there are challenges that remain. So areas for further study would include engagement of primary care providers, engagement of the community, and also, while this model did specifically serve thinking about the founder Ashkenazi Jewish BRCA mutations, there are a plethora of other contexts where this could be applied. So the idea of a digital model in partnership with primary care providers may not be limited to the Ashkenazi Jewish population and should be studied in other contexts as well.